Constantin here. Welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday, everyone. Ashley, you and I haven't gone live together in a couple of weeks now. It's been a busy time for both of us.
Yeah.
What a topic for today, Ashley.
Well, according to you, you're the one who brought
According to
this
me.
topic up.
Right?
It is forgiveness, which, if anybody watches any of my videos, it is the key to everything. It is the one thing I believe that the solution is forgiving, whether it's forgiveness or the two words of forgiving.
I love that. And I mean, I knew as soon as this came up for me in meditation, I had to bring it up to you and for us to have a conversation because it seems to be in your wheelhouse. Not as much in mine yet, as I'm still understanding and trying to learn what this means. And let's start. I mean, I want to start perhaps on your end, or if you want, I can start with my take on what forgiveness is. But I would love to hear your opinion based on the Course of Miracles and your studies and your own meditations and everything you've gone through, especially with that beautiful story you got to share this week in one of your videos, which we'll talk about later as well for those interested. But yeah, let's start there, Ashley.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a question, Constantine. I think ultimately it's been just such a journey of undefining what forgiveness was defined as for me, and now I view that as ego forgiveness, which is really that the forgiveness to defend, the forgiveness to destroy, which is like, oh, Constantine, you hurt me, but I'll forgive you. So it still acknowledges that Constantine did something, which acknowledges that you're separate than me. So ego
Mm.
forgiveness like reiterates the story, the narrative, which keeps us stuck here that we are separate. When true forgiveness, which it sounds like it's an action, right? But it's really like a lack of action. True forgiveness is like not buying the ego narrative and instead remembering that in fact we are one and you contain the love of God, so you cannot be impacted at all. So it's like in that moment seeing what it is, what it is. And I know a lot of people are like, but people do awful things to me and blah blah blah. And I'm not discounting that. Things like that happen in the illusion to bodies, but you're not a body. So that's where the true forgiveness is realizing like you are not that body that you are witnessing things occurring to. You are this, eternal being that is the love of God. And so it's really also combined with the separation from the belief in the body, the belief that that is what you are, which again, you and I've kind of like broke this down, and I get so perplexed even for myself that some of the greatest thought leaders right now in the personal development and new age movement talk about the I am presence, and they tell you they're not your body, but the way they tell you to like heal and to step into that I am presence is to get out of the mind and into the body, which to me is like super contradicting, and it makes no sense because you're telling me it's the I am presence that I truly am, but then you're telling me in the next moment to get into my body and that's where it's found, which those are contradicting completely. But that's a discussion for another day. So ultimately, how I view forgiveness today is a lack of action. It's the undeciding to believe the ego's narrative that's going on, the unidentification of the body, and the unbelief in separation.
Yeah, so interesting and so different, right? And let me ask you this, like in a lot of practices, and I know I'm going through that to some degree myself, there is the forgiveness of self for things you've done or haven't done in the past.
Mm.
How does that come into play with the definition or the way you describe forgiveness, right? Because if you say, okay, you're not the body, understanding that because you talked about things happening to you, but how about things happening of your creation that perhaps there's some shame, guilt, blame, judgment around that you need to find forgiveness towards?
Mm. So the type of forgiveness you're talking about is still acknowledging it, that it occurred and that I can be a sinner, right? Like if we really break it down, it goes with my little Jesus. How everybody believes we're like these awful sinners, and this little guy who's dancing had to be nailed to the cross and die, God's only son, in order for us to be saved. right? That's what you're talking about in that forgiveness. And I get it. Like I was at that point and I went and dug it up. But the problem is there's still just as much weight, right? And that's the key here is the weight we place on things. And, anybody listening to this, whether you've read the Course in Miracles or have picked up one of the most recent thought leaders' books, they talk about living in the now, right? Be here now.
Yeah.
By forgiveness of the past, how is that living in the now? Because the past never existed. If you truly live in the present moment, the past never existed. So I'm not talking about metaphysically ghosting yourself, but it's bringing the awareness to that. In fact, it was a projection of your shame and guilt that occurred. And the only way to move through that is to fully release the weight, which is to acknowledge what it was, which was a cry for love, and to acknowledge that who you truly are, which is the I am presence, was watching a movie. If I go watch a movie and a killer kills someone, am I going to leave there feeling guilty because I killed someone?
No, of course not.
Exactly. And now I'm not, people might hop and watch this and be like, oh my gosh, so you're saying we can do whatever we want and not feel guilty for it. Well, that goes against everything, because what we're talking about right now in this practice of forgiveness is people really working towards the remembrance of truth, which is that you are love. So it's doing things from a place of love, which when you're coming from a place of love, you would not do those things, if that makes sense. So that brings in level confusion. And of course, if someone says that, that's their ego just trying to justify what they've always wanted to do anyway. So go ahead, do what you're going to do. But that's not what this conversation is about.
Yeah, this is getting very deep here. So, I mean, it's bringing up a lot of things for me. And when you said the cry for love, that actually sparked something within me, because it brought up some memories that perhaps I still hold some shame, guilt, blame around. And immediately got broken down. Literally, this happened within the span of like 1 second or less. I was like, that's what that was. I never knew. That's actually very interesting, right? Because for me, forgiveness, I'm still probably at the level of the ego, like you said, or the level of whatever we are right now in this life, about things that happened in the past that are holding weight now into the present and impacting the future, perhaps. And how do you find forgiveness for yourself for those discretions, let's say, right? Whatever they were, however big they were for you in the moment.
Yeah. So I've done tons of things I wasn't happy about in my life, and I felt shame and guilt and all that stuff. One of the biggest pieces I realized in regards to that, in the release of that, is sharing it. And you don't need to share it with the world, but when you keep it in the darkness, right, which is when we believe it's a private thought, that's another piece here. Like we could go into a whole nother discussion about that, but we all think we're walking around with private thoughts, that we have our own thoughts and nobody else knows what's going on. But the problem is we're one, right? Like everybody is one. So your belief that you have these secrets is a bunch of crap. And all your secrets are truly doing, which if anybody's familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous or the 12-step program, one of their main things they say is your secrets will keep you sick, which is so absolutely beautiful because it is so true. What you are not, what you feel as though you are holding secret, you're actually holding secret from the one thing or entity or being that can actually release it for you, right? That's the big piece of forgiveness. Is like our first 2 steps is to relinquish the belief in it, to not identify with the ego belief system. But ultimately in this process of forgiveness, that only frees up the space for spirit to then take it, right? If you're not holding on to it like this, which means you're identifying, then spirit can take it and be like, okay, we're taking that belief from you. But we're all gripping onto these things so much that like they're just ruling our lives, and including your past discretions. You're holding so tight to it because you feel so much shame and guilt, and really what you're doing is you're creating more shame and guilt, and you're not allowing spirit or your highest self or God or whatever you believe is out there to actually free it from you. And only when you free it from you do you allow the space for the miracle to be received. When you're like this, you can't receive a miracle, friend.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I
Yeah.
can definitely see it because through my journey, there was, and I'm wondering if you had this feeling too, Ashley, and anyone listening right now, we have lots of people tuning in. When you go through your daily life, right, and then all of a sudden something happens and it brings up a memory, and you're like, yeah, that's cringe worthy, right? Like you're like, oh, I don't want to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like usually something with shame, something with guilt, something with blame. That was my case, right? And I had a lot of those come up.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I, like you said, sat with them a bit more and brought them up to the surface and allowed to feel into it and let them go.
Mm.
Or let spirit take it in this case, like you mentioned. And then all of a sudden, the weight of that memory or the weight of that, yeah, just went away. And it's like, really, it can be that easy?
Well, it's because you became the observer, right? So, one of the greatest ways I think I've heard it explained and how I explain it now is dreaming. So, if you dreamt last night, Constantine, that I ran over one of your dogs, you might wake up this morning like upset or like this heaviness or this fear or something. And then when you think of Ashley, you feel this irritation and you don't know why until you remember, oh, I had this dream last night. And in that moment, you remember it was a dream. And it's gone like that. And all of a sudden, there is no weight around Ashley. There is no weight around your day. That is literally what true forgiveness is. It's the realization that it's just a projection and that you are actually not separate. You are not a body, so it can't happen to you. And that's what you do in that moment with what you just shared, Constantine, is you
Mm,
really took the observer role, which is truly what you are, right? A lot of these personal development books and stuff want you to use the observer role in order to gain more things in the illusion, which is just spiritualizing the ego. So it's very contradictory and it puts you on this crazy ass roller coaster of really high highs and really low lows. And it's a really, really crazy time instead of saying, you're always the observer. So if you're always the observer, why would you utilize what you are to gain things in the illusion that you know you're just observing? Right?
wow, that's a mic drop moment right there, Ashley. It's like,
Yeah.
so what's okay? I shouldn't say, I shouldn't ask what's the answer, but let's dive into that a bit more. So you're using your role of observer to gain things in the illusion to do what? That means you're really truly not understanding the role of the observer in that case, right? The role of what you are to play in this world or in this.
Well, wait. I know it's not. Yeah, maybe, kind of, but it's almost like you're so aware of the power that the observer role holds that you're like, why not use it now? Why not create all these fake things within the illusion to create fake happiness? Right? Because we're so ingrained to believe our happiness is within the illusion when really you miss the bigger picture. And that's when I have a friend, I was on his podcast once, he talks about um, the picture. But the problem is we get stuck at the frame, and the frame is covered in all these shiny gems and all this stuff. So we're missing the actual beautiful picture that's within the frame that actually matters. Right. And that's what we're doing when we're picking and choosing the observer role. So I wouldn't necessarily say that like these big thought leaders that are utilizing the observer role don't understand it correctly, because I'm not sure if correct's like even a good
Yeah.
word for that. But instead they're understanding it, but they're allowing their ego to utilize it for gain within the illusion, which actually is so contradicting to what your truth actually is. And again, that's why we end up with so much duality in our life when we use it that way, right? That's why we have the high highs and the low lows, and when life is going great, it's going great. But when life falls apart, it's a freaking mess.
Absolutely. But what's the, maybe balance is not the right word here or the right question. So for me, it would be like, where's the balance in there, right? Because to be able, at least the way I understand it, and I know that we disagree on this part, and that's fine, and I'm curious to see your take. So let's say in the illusion right now where we are, the material aspect of it allows you to potentially have a broader reach to different parts of you. Let's say different souls, right? Different people. So if you don't have things in the illusion, let's say you're someone that's a homeless person, how are you? Well, what am I trying to say here, Ashley? I'm trying to say is like, isn't there like a balance between like having like using this knowing to build things in the illusion so you can have a bigger impact? And I'm answering my own question here. I know I'm spewing BS right now.
Well,
But
no, I think it's great because so many people believe this, and I did too. And I think the biggest piece is the belief in having impact, right? It only the Course in Miracles says how many children. Oh gosh, how many teachers of God does it take to save the whole? Something like that, and the answer is one. And the reason why the answer is one is because it has nothing to do with manipulating something within the illusion. And it has everything to do with finding your way back to the mind and remembering truth. A homeless man doesn't need things to do that. He could sit on the park bench and figure it out, right? A monk doesn't need things to do that. I don't need things to do that. And to be honest, I was actually kind of grappling with this morning because a lot of times on my videos, I get people telling me to stop preaching. And it was funny. I said to Patrick, I would much rather be a Baptist preacher than, the Catholic pastor that I fell asleep at when I was a child. But that's besides the point. But I was really leaning into it this morning and I was like, is that what I'm trying to do, is minister people? And I was like, no, because I know it doesn't matter if other people understand this. What matters most is that I understand it myself. And I don't know how many people are tuning in. You're probably like, you're super selfish. Well, maybe it could be seen that way, but ultimately these videos, these conversations you and I have, what I put on YouTube, our Patreon call, really is my own learning and my deeper understanding. And when I seem preachy, it's because I'm so passionate, and a lot of times it is about moments like this where we've been shared that the observer is meant to be utilized to gain more things in the illusion, or we've been told we're sinners and all that. I get so wrapped up in it because I still have old narratives tied to that, because that's what I was raised on, right? I was raised that, you must repent and be small and not voice what it is you want, but do for everyone else. Like, those are my narratives that I'm in the process of grappling through. And for me, I'm a verbal processor. So these videos, these conversations, all of that is my way of processing at another level. And I do one-on-one coaching, and I have my mastermind too. But ultimately, those are people that resonate with this style, and they resonate with the space that I provide. But ultimately, I know they're me, right? So I show up for them as I would want someone to show up for me.
yeah,
I don't know. I kind of went on like this rabbit hole. Other than the fact is, like, we feel like we have this grand purpose, but our only purpose is to focus on yourself. Because again, when we're like, oh, I have this purpose, I must change the world, you immediately projected out everything, right? And the only place that anything can change or be remembered, like I'm going to try to work on you using the word heal, because we're not broken. We're the furthest from broken. We just have all these extra layers on us that we've got to take off. And that's all that we need to do here, is do our own work. But the second we're like, I need to save everyone else, is really kind of an opportunity to be like, what are you ignoring within yourself that you need to go do in someone else that you're not willing to do for you?
yeah. I love it.
I mean, I was at that place. I was like, I'm going to build an empire. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to make sure everybody does mushrooms. I'm going to send them all these books and blah, blah, blah. Until I realized, like, shit, that's because there's still stuff I'm not willing to look at within myself.
Yes, and that resonates so deeply. When I began my journey, right, and through my coaching and the events I run and whatnot, one of the big parts of what I talk about is purpose. Mm-hmm. And when I started on the journey of purpose, it was all very external, meaning, your purpose as a human being is to be in service of others.
Mm-hmm.
And however service looks like to you, it's fine, right? And almost everyone in the space talks about it being external of you. And I think a few months ago now, I realized, wait a second, it starts, to me at least, it starts with you first. And by doing the work on yourself is how your purpose now gets to show itself to everyone else and then impact the rest of the people in your life. However, it could be one, it could be a million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm hearing you say as well. I don't want to paraphrase fully what you said, but to me, it feels the way like it starts with you. Your purpose is whatever it is, your path in this life, that, the forgiveness you mentioned or whatever you believe in. But it starts with you, because once you do that, then you can give that freely out. Don't give, just shine it freely out to the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always you. I don't even think it starts with you. It just always is you. And the second we start to think like, oh, I've done my work, now I can shine, is the second that you really are on the opposite side of that spectrum. And so it is always you. I mean, my focus is always myself, my deeper understanding, my deeper unwinding. Yes, again, in the process, I'm walking with others on their journey, but my focus is never like, okay, now it's time to be the light. It's like, as long as I'm always working on myself, I know the light just is.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It just is a piece of that. So, but the cool thing about this is like whoever's tuning in, our purpose is forgiveness. So forgiving or forgiving. So you're either in the process of giving or you're in the process of forgiving, and you can do that through any profession, right? We all think we have to become these coaches or these thought leaders in order to have impact, but the truth is not that. And that's why too, like the homeless guy can have just as much impact as, freaking Tony Robbins or Jay Shetty, because it's all happening at the level of the mind. He can actually have more impact, most likely because he's really more open, I think, to opportunities of moving out of the ego. He isn't stuck in that rat race, but that's missed. We think that, oh, I'm only fulfilling my purpose if, like, literally going to the grocery store and showing up with a mindset of this is forgiving, whether it's giving or forgiveness, is massive impact. And I think today, oh gosh, there's just so many things. Yeah, in regards to like, yeah, I don't know. That's a rabbit hole that we're probably not wanting to go down today.
You said, I want to go back to something you said that was really interesting to me, because I think I feel like I finally understand more. So, the difference between, let's say, the homeless person and someone like Jay Shetty or Tony Robbins that has an influence with millions and millions of people, right?
Mhm.
But that influence is at the level of the ego. Now I understand the way you described it, because before I was like, well, yeah, of course, someone that, you would want to get to the people that are very influential because they have a chance to impact so many people.
Mhm. I used to think that too.
Right. And then now it's like, oh, but the person can. But actually, let's go back for a second.
But there's only one person here is the biggest piece. There's only one mind here.
Well, yeah, that's the oneness piece. Okay. So you were all one. But then from that one, like the rays of the sun, and then you go, like you expand, and there's, billions of us right now, however many in the universe beyond that. Wouldn't we say that, let's say, through us having a bigger influence, let's say like a Jay Shetty, or Jay Shetty, or Tony Robbins, you'll be able to actually help more parts of you realize the truth and get back to oneness, or get back to forgiveness? Because versus the homeless person that has a limited scope of influence within the illusion, yeah, can help himself or herself get to that level, but someone that has a broader influence in the illusion can get more parts of the self to heal and get back to, not heal, forgive and get back to source.
Well, so there's like so many different level confusions happening in this conversation. But at like a metaphysical level, us being one, it's not like we are one and we broke off into many and now we're all pieces. We all contain the whole. So it's like a hologram, right? The hologram, each little piece you see actually contains the whole, right? So that's where it's hard to wrap your mind around. Like, it's
Mm,
we're each the whole. We're the whole mind, right? So if I did all of my forgiveness lessons, it heals it for the entire sonship, and we all go home. But the problem is, it's already all happened. So it's a movie we're watching. So just like if Tony Robbins gets 50 more people to come watch the movie screen, but in my movie, there's only one person watching, like it doesn't matter. The movie's going to end when it ends. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So I'm not saying that they don't appear to have a larger impact in the illusion. I'm not saying that it wouldn't feel as though there is a collective shift within the illusion. But what I'm saying is that's not necessary. So, like, when you're placing the weight on them being better than is the moment you've missed the entire, like, understanding. Because within the illusion, when we're looking at truth, which is unconditional love and forgiveness, there is no hierarchy, right? That's duality. So we're trying to talk duality, but we're trying to talk about something that isn't of duality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's one of those, like, yeah, like I probably couldn't have said that 7 months ago because I wouldn't know how to articulate it. I still, like, it's still probably people listening, like, what the fuck's she talking about?
so let's get back to the topic, I guess, the forgiveness for a second. I mean, this is all about that, right? So you said there's two ways you can look at it, like the actual word forgiveness that has one definition. Then, of course, splitting up the word in two parts is forgiving or forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And the second way of looking at it is it's about you giving, I guess, your light to others, right? Or how does like forgiving, the two words one, work for you separately or differently than the forgiving piece when you look at it as a full word?
Because it's just always giving, forgiving. Um, and giving is receiving. So in teaching is learning, those statements. And the reason why is because we're all one. And like I said earlier, what you hold on to is what you're not willing to either let go of or to actually receive, if that makes sense. So like if I have all this knowledge and I think I'm keeping it private from you, I'm actually keeping it private from myself because we're all one. So in forgiving is just really this open, like, openness the entire time in the acknowledgement of the oneness, because the second you stop giving and you believe you're taking or holding, is those are separation, right? Forgiving is like just this, like, oneness statement when you look at it in the understanding of in giving is receiving, we are one, this open flow. I mean, I know you talk about that like a lot, like this open flow of energy, this open flow of giving and receiving type thing, and this like ever abundant pool of no one is ever lacking because there is no one ever separate, and we're all one with spirit, which is wholly abundant. So that's always just like the second you're not willing to give is the second you believe you're lacking. Does that make
Yes. Oh,
sense?
100%. Yeah. And I've
Right.
lived that a lot in my life, and I'm sure there's still remnants of it right now.
But that's the moment that like you believe in separation, that's all those things. So like when you're in this giving, you're in this like place of giving.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
Not, I mean, to me, it makes sense. I'm sure that for anyone, depending on their path and at what stage they're at, it might be more difficult or less difficult to understand.
Yeah.
This is got me, got a lot of things happening in my mind
Well,
here.
and it looks
Actually,
so
making me think.
different. Like some people now, and this is where the level of confusion comes in, right? So when we're talking that, this is like at the level of the mind. When it's at like the
Yeah.
level of the body, people will be like, oh, so I should give all my money or should give all these things. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But it's really looking at how the mind is viewing everything. Right? Are you viewing it as like this holding on to or this lack? Like when you feel spirit guide you. You've heard Constantine in our Patreon calls. I like to say, who are you spending your money with? Who's spending your money? Is it fear? Is it love? Is it the ego, or is it spirit? And in those moments of like feeling led by spirit to share your money or spend your money, if you like contract and go into this state of fear, that's the ego trying to like step in and make you believe something else. Now, to me, if all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not in spirit unless I'm giving away all my money, that's just the opposite side of the pendulum. And that's, again, the ego using fear to make you fearful that you won't be in spirit if you're not giving, right? So you have to be careful. That pendulum swings and it will use both sides against you. And it's really about being in this middle ground of openness and discernment. But always coming from this place of love. And by no means am I fully there. Like this is what I work towards every single day as I'm continuously working to unwind. Yeah. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's so powerful as well, right? Because it's so easy to see the two ends of the spectrum. But then as you get closer to balance, at least the way I see it is, it's much harder to see if you are actually in that balance, or if you're still swinging left or right more, right? Because like, what do you find? Okay, let's use the example. You have a bunch of money. Where do you draw the line and say, well, this is how much I give away, this is how much I keep, this is how much I use, all the stuff, right? Because that's when you get in between those two ends, and you're like, oh, but which side of the pendulum am I on?
Yeah. I mean, by no means should this be taken as gospel. But that's so funny. Like, that's another conversation that came to my mind the other day. It's like, what the fuck? Like, the second we say gospel, we think that's truth. So I should take that back, because I don't necessarily believe that the gospel is all truth. But what a statement. But for me, when you ask me that question, because money has been, oh my gosh, such a massive narrative of my entire spiritual journey, mental health journey of life in general, money has been very much at the forefront. And I will say today, it really isn't. It isn't in the background, but it isn't in the front ground. I know in manifesting and everything, I literally saw an ad come up on my YouTube that said, the amount of money in your bank account is a direct representation of your relationship with money. And I was like, what in the actual crap? And then I remember, like, that's what they teach in manifestation. That's what they teach, is like, you need to have this amazing relationship with money. And then I remembered I used to have money all throughout my house, because I think it was Jen Shapiro's You're a Badass at Making Money said, like, become one with money. And, I had it all over my house. It was just this whole thing. And today, money, there isn't a relationship with it. Now, most people are like, that's bad. That's real bad. But to me, it's like, why? So relationship is how we do all of our healing, and we're in relationship with everything until we're not, in my mind. And the moment that we no longer are in relationship with it is the moment that we've released the weight and have handed it back over to spirit. So I feel like maybe that's what I've done with money, is I just really know that it's always going to be taken care of, whatever that looks like. And I don't question it, and I really am spending my money with love, so it's always there. And anytime I catch myself being like, but I need more, or I want more, I'm like, what? Wait, what are we seeking? We're seeking happiness. Like, I don't need that Omega watch. I don't need, to have $100,000 in my savings account. Like, I am always held, and that is what matters at the end of the day. So to round back around to your question, because I had to give that background.
No, of course.
Is if I caught myself having that conversation with myself, that would be a red flag for me. For me personally, of like, ooh, okay, we've put a lot of weight back in the money category. It's time to do some unpacking, handing back over to spirit. And again, like, if you're here to make tons of money and manipulate the illusion, it will, like, you can do the manifesting stuff and it works a lot of time until it doesn't anymore. And that's what happened with me. Like, I was living high until it stopped working, because it's really, yeah, that's
why do you think it stopped working? Like, what those the lesson in that, essentially, like showing you the power You
I
have?
mean, I think, well, it was definitely a part of my journey. And I think one of a great saying that there is for A Course in Miracles is most people find their way to it because they've exhausted like all resources and they kind of have this back against the wall moment. And they're like, I've tried this, but none of it, like, it all makes sense in little pieces, but none of it makes sense, if that makes sense. So their back's against the wall. And they're usually like, there has to be another way. And then the course usually finds their way to that person. And I think I had still this deep belief that I was going to find my happiness in money. That's where it was. Like, I had everything else handled. Like, I had done tons of work. I had already started my business. I had like really got to the space where I thought I was very spiritually grounded and in tune with my highest self. But I found out later I had actually began to spiritualize the ego because I started to use that connection with my highest self for illusionary gain, which I found out in the end was not real because it could be gone in a minute. And then I was like, dang, there has to be another way that keeps consistency, right?
Mm,
And it keeps like, it never can be taken from you. It just is. Like, I had a friend reach out to me the other day and she's like, "Well, you say there's this, constant state of joy that is our innate state, but how come the second like everything starts going right in my business and I feel joy, then I get scared and want to sabotage?" And I said, well, that was not the joy I'm talking about. The joy you're talking about is ego happiness. It was based on an external circumstance instead of truly finding within. And it doesn't matter what happens on the outside, right? See what I mean?
yeah.
Because it can be taken. Like, if your happiness, like even right now, Constantine, if you're like, let's say you want to do something, we all do this. We're like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So I need to
Yeah,
save up all this money. Like, we're constantly waiting. But the problem is, like, if you can't find the happiness in the here and now, I promise you, you will not be able to find it there because it has nothing to do with that and has everything to do what's going on within yourself.
exactly. Yeah, that's been a rude awakening a while back for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you see it, I mean, you see it everywhere in the world, right?
Oh, yeah. But people aren't willing to admit it, especially when they're doing really well, right? Like, and I think that's why I had to go through the money piece, was like, I had to experience the high of where it felt like I thought it was happiness, but it didn't feel like happiness. And then the crash and be like, oh shit, that still can be taken. That's not what I want to be fighting for.
Yeah, yeah. Powerful stuff. I know we have a hard stop here in like 14 minutes. I want
Yeah.
to bring us back to the story you shared earlier this week in one of your videos. And I thought that was really powerful. And I'm curious to see, now that you have more time to reflect on it, like, what was the forgiveness lesson in that? And of course, people listening right now, they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So maybe Ash, you can give us like the synopsis, 30 seconds of what happened, or a minute, however long it takes. And I'm curious
Yeah.
to see what, because a lot of things came up for me in listening to your story, but I'm curious from your take, because you're such a beautiful way of describing what you think it may have been or how it was. And I'm curious, now that you've reflected on it, if there's something more that came up.
Yeah, I think our friend Tommy, he messaged me back and it was there's a statement from the Bible, and I'm super awful. So anybody who like is a person that you need to cite the Bible correctly, that is not going to be me. So you're probably going to get mad. But ultimately, oh, I wish I could find it. Tommy. It was oh, here we go. If you okay, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door will be open. So I think that's been misconstrued often. And they recently covered that in The Chosen of like, oh, if I ask for new shoes, if I ask to be rich, if I ask, for tangible things within the illusion, that's going to happen. But what that statement I think really means is like, if you are open, it will come. And like we talked earlier, the forgiveness needs to occur to remove a barrier to the miracle. So part of that story was earlier I prayed and I was like, because I'm a firm believer that spirit has to show you. It's spirit's job to prove to you what's going on here, but it can only do that when you are actually open to seeing it. So I'm open to receiving the miracle. I have accepted the miracle for myself. And that morning I'm like, I want a holy instant today, Spirit. I'm feeling heavy. I need a moment. Show me, show me, show me, show me. But the difference is, many times when we have that prayer, we've already decided what show me means. We've already
Yes.
decided that show me means you're going to give me $10 because my bank account's at zero and I need to eat today, right? You've already decided. I hadn't decided at all. I just knew that I was in a state. I woke up with a lack of gratitude and I was confused and felt heavy. And so I was like, Spirit, like, you got to show me. And in that moment, I had this flash of an accident that had been brought to my awareness the day prior from Patrick, which Patrick and I have been praying about being used as one vessel, that we are, and like to be the light for others. But I saw this accident and I just felt this immense weight, and I was supposed to be going out of town. And I realized, like, that's what it was. And Jesus I meet him in the movie theater when I pray. And he was like, yeah, this is an opportunity. Like, you have this energy. If we're going to use like illusionary terms, this energy that needs to be released. So a barrier that needs to be removed, that's ready to be removed. You ask for it to be removed. And you've got some options. You can go drive to St. Pete and suffer an accident that's going to be pretty significant. Or you can see that this is actually, doesn't matter if you go to St. Pete or not, right? And there is no weight there, which played into old narratives of people pleasing for me, because I had already had plans with people. It also played into narratives of my money narratives we talked about, because I've been in places where I had no money and I had already paid for a rental car. And heaven forbid you rent something and you don't follow through with it. Heaven forbid you make plans and you don't follow through. So for me, I think it was really a reminder of what Tommy had shared. And sometimes I need those reminders too. And that definitely must have been why I woke up feeling heavy, was I was in that space of the ego trying to place doubt, heaviness. And instead of in the past sinking deeper into that, or even trying to analyze it, right? The ego loves to be analyzed. That's why personal development is such the craze. And that's why it works at the beginning, because at the beginning, you're bringing awareness to these behaviors you were never aware of before. So you make massive changes. That's step one in spirit development too. But the difference between personal development and spirit development is personal development, you just keep analyzing. It's like crack. And you're constantly searching for that first outcome you got, right? The first high you got from the first time you brought awareness to a behavior you had and changed it. But the problem is you cross the line and you keep analyzing, which means it's ego behavior, because the ego loves to be analyzed. Spirit, you analyze until you've analyzed enough, which isn't very much. And then you start releasing stuff. You start handing it over to spirit, and you stop analyzing. Like, I woke up that morning, instead of analyzing, I had already built this relation to open myself up to the miracle. I just went into prayer and was like, show me. I don't know what this is. Doesn't matter. Show me. Right. And that's what I received.
Wow. That spoke directly to me as well. The fine delineation between analyzing ego and loving to be analyzed, or just releasing it. And it's like, it kind of put some pieces together for me on my own journey of forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because you, like you said, you had to unpack a few things when that happened, right? Because you essentially canceled the plans you had made over a few days or weeks, the day of.
Yeah.
Which brought up certain feelings, I would imagine, that you had to navigate through.
Yeah, but the interesting piece is, so when I did that video, there had been some hours in between. I like went for a run, which I talk about in there, be like lit up like a little miracle. But
yes, that was powerful too.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, Constantine, it was pretty, like, Patrick and I came out of prayer. I laid my head on his chest. I almost felt like I was to start crying. He asked me what. I said, I don't think I'm supposed to go. And he's like, what do you mean? I briefly told him, and he's like, how does it feel? And one of the biggest things I've learned from this process of unwinding is we don't need to push in the hard, I don't think. I don't think like all that shit we've been taught with personal development is to like push into the hard. You know when you're avoiding, and yes, push into that. But by no means do I think we need to push in when it really truly feels uncomfortable. Like that is not where transformation is occurring. That's not where spirit lives. Spirit's the one thing that's going to save your ass. Spirit lives in joy. So when Patrick asked me that question, going to St. Pete, the fear that was there felt heavy. And for one split second, my mind was like, but if you don't go, you're feeding into fear. Right. And I was like, no, that's not actually the case, because not going, I don't feel anything. I'm just like, it just is. It just is. So all of that, like those like thoughts I brought up in my video and stuff were thoughts like when I started to unpack it in the video, I'm like, yeah, these used to be people pleasing and this and this, and these are old narratives and stuff. But I was like, it was like cleared for me. And that's what true forgiveness is, right? True forgiveness is the handing over and the miracle coming in. And that's what happened in those brief moments of meditation and prayer, and then, you know, canceling with friends, and then unpacking the rest in the video. And crying. I mean, I guess I left out that hour-long part of crying where I released the energy that was behind all of these narratives, hiding.
Yeah, that's powerful. And for those watching right now, go check out Ashley's video. I think it's from Tuesday or Wednesday you posted. I forgot which day.
Yeah, Wednesday. I posted Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday. And
or no, Thursday. I posted Thursday. Sorry, Constantine.
Thursday? Yeah.
And
it's blending for me this time, so I don't know.
Yeah, the thumbnail says you're not supposed to be seeing this or something like that.
Yeah. Perfect, Ashley. I know. So as we're getting here to the end of our conversation, to make sure we honoring the time that we have set apart for this, any last thoughts on the topic today for forgiveness? Anything else you want to add? Maybe, you know, where people can find you, anything like that?
Yeah. Sorry, so ultimately, I wanted to quick add, even for you, Constantine. So the Patreon, Big Miracle Energy Patreon, the Right-Minded Thinkers, we're actually doing a book club. And this is the book, Forgiveness and Jesus. It's where Christianity and A Course in Miracles, the meeting place of them. And it really unpacks all these things we kind of unpacked today. So yeah, if you join the Right-Minded Thinkers, we've actually started a book club. We're doing one chapter a month. So it will be like a 16-month book club, but this is a beautiful deep dive. Again, even if you don't fully resonate with the things Constantine shares or the things I share, I promise you that reading a book like that, even if you don't join the book club, will really bring some thought-provoking things for you to dig deeper in your own faith and to question, was this mine? Is this someone else's? What aligns with me? Because it just so beautifully references the Bible and the Course and Judaism and just all these different pieces where you're like, wow, they have a similar message, but then whatever got into it. So I invite you too, Constantine. We start Tuesday.
Okay. I haven't seen that book yet, but yes, let's we'll talk offline and we'll go over that. So thank you, Ashley.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess next week we're doing the Patreon call, so it's not going to be on YouTube. That's the private one. So people can find you a Big Miracle Energy on Patreon if they want to join and listen more to what Ashley's saying. And of course, on YouTube at Big Miracle Energy, you can find Ashley and me. You can find me at Unleash Thyself on YouTube. And I have a big event coming up on July 18, which you'll be able to find more info about soon. But other than that, have an amazing Sunday, everyone. And Ashley, this was a beautiful conversation. Got me to reflect on a lot now, so I can go into my meditation and reflect on a lot of what we talked about.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Constantine, as always. And thank you for anyone and everyone who tuned in now or later.